Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to act like map makers exploring the most complex, absolutely fascinating territory on Earth, the structural blueprint of the human body. Think about it. You wouldn't just wander off into some uncharted wilderness without a compass and a map, right? Well, in the exact same way, medical professionals and scientists literally cannot understand human health without first mastering the structural layout of our biology. So, let's chart that territory together.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit the blueprint of life, define gross anatomy, set up our anatomical compass, map out the body cavities, and finally wrap up with how form fundamentally dictates function. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The Blueprint of Life. Understanding the foundation of bodily structure.
You know, the word anatomy itself actually strips away a lot of the intimidation surrounding the subject. It comes from the Greek roots ana, which means up, and temnein, meaning to cut. So, quite literally, it just means to cut apart. It's the scientific study of exactly how the physical space of an organism is organized. Historically, before we had incredible tech like X-rays or MRI machines, the only way to truly figure out this map was through the formal practice of dissection, literally taking things apart to see how structures connect and relate within the living body.
Now, there's a really vital contrast we need to establish between our two main biological sciences. On one side, we have anatomy, which is all about structure and form. On the flip side, we have physiology, which is all about function, how those structures actually work to keep us alive. The thing is, you cannot fully understand the physiological how without first grasping the anatomical what and where. It's exactly like trying to figure out how a car engine runs without knowing what a spark plug or a piston even looks like. Anatomy provides that absolutely essential structural foundation, and the gross anatomy we're focusing on today sits firmly right there on the structure side of the divide.
Moving to Section 2. Defining gross anatomy. Macroscopic views versus the microscopic world. Within this broader context of anatomy, we generally split things up based on how closely we need to look. On one end, we have gross anatomy, also known as macroscopic anatomy. And no, gross doesn't mean it's disgusting, it simply means large. We're talking about the big picture here. The brain, the heart, the bones, stuff you can easily observe, manipulate, and measure with just the naked eye. On the exact opposite end, we've got microscopic anatomy, requiring optical or electron microscopes. That includes cytology, the study of individual cells, and histology, the study of tissues. But for our map making today, we're keeping our view zoomed way out, focusing strictly on that macroscopic world of gross anatomy.
So, looking at this large-scale macroscopic map, we've basically got three specific ways to study it. First up is surface anatomy. That's where we just observe external landmarks without any dissection at all. Second, we have regional anatomy. This is where we zoom in on a specific neighborhood of the body, say the head, neck, or abdomen, and we examine how all the muscles, nerves, blood vessels, and organs pack together and interact in that one confined space. And finally, there's systemic anatomy. This is kind of like tracing a single subway line across the entire map. It looks at a group of structures working together for a unique function, like looking at all the skeletal muscles in the body as one collective unit. And just as a quick aside, modern teaching heavily favors that regional approach because it's just incredibly practical for clinical settings and surgery.
All right, Section 3. The Anatomical Compass. Navigating the Bodily Map.
Picture this for a second. You're a healthcare provider, and you're trying to describe a patient's injury to a surgeon. If you say there's a scar above the wrist, what does that actually mean? Is it on the forearm, 2 inches up from the hand? Is it right at the base of the hand, palm side, back side? And what if the patient is lying face down with their arms raised above their head? You can easily see how this kind of ambiguity could lead to, well, disastrous medical errors. We absolutely need a baseline standard to completely eliminate this confusion.
And that brings us to our map's true north, the standard anatomical position. Think of it as the ultimate baseline. It's a person standing upright, feet at shoulder width and parallel, toes forward, with the arms held out to each side and the palms of the hands facing directly forward. This is crucial. No matter how a patient is actually lying on an operating table or positioned inside an MRI machine, medical professionals will always describe body parts as if the patient is standing in this exact palms forward position. It ensures everybody is always speaking the exact same structural language.
Once our map is properly oriented, we use paired directional terms as our specific coordinates to navigate the spatial relationships between structures. It's pretty logical once you get the hang of it. Superior means above, while inferior means below. So your nose is superior to your mouth. Anterior means toward the front, and posterior is toward the back. Medial means closer to the midline of your body, and lateral means away from it. And finally, proximal and distal. These are mostly used for the limbs to describe what is closer to or farther from the point where the limb attaches to the body. Committing these coordinates to memory is an absolute must for understanding how our gross anatomy fits together spatially.
Section 4. Mapping body cavities, the hollow spaces that house our organs.
So the body is essentially split into two main protective compartments that maintain all our internal organization. First up, the dorsal cavity, which is posterior or at the back. You can think of this cavity as heavy-duty armor. Its main job is to fiercely protect the central nervous system, housing the brain up in the cranial cavity and the spinal cord right down the spinal cavity. Second, we have the much larger ventral cavity, located anteriorly at the front. The ventral cavity is less like armor and more like a flexible, dynamic workshop. It allows for massive changes in the size and shape of our organs. Think about it. Your lungs, heart, stomach, intestines, they are constantly expanding and contracting to keep you alive, and the ventral cavity gives them the dynamic space they need to do that without crushing nearby tissues.
If we conceptually travel from top to bottom through this active ventral workshop, it's kind of like going down floors in a building. We start up top in the thoracic cavity, containing the lungs and the pleural cavities and the heart right in the central mediastinum. Heading downward, we hit a literal floor, the diaphragm. This is a crucial muscular boundary layer that separates the chest from the lower half. Cross the diaphragm, and boom, we enter the abdominal-pelvic cavity. The upper abdominal portion is where our digestive organs live, like the stomach and liver, while the lower pelvic cavity houses the reproductive organs and the bladder. It is a perfectly organized, multi-level home for our internal anatomy.
Finally, Section 5. Form dictates function, bringing the blueprint to life.
So why go through all the trouble of mapping out these macroscopic structures, regions, and cavities? Well, it all boils down to this one absolutely foundational rule. The structure of an organ invariably dictates its physiological capabilities. This is the ultimate takeaway of our entire structural map. The highly specific spatial arrangement and physical form of every single bone, muscle, and organ directly enables it to do its job. For example, the alignment of your thumb in opposition to your other four fingers. That is a strict structural reality that unlocks your physiological capability to pinch, to grasp tools, or to text on your phone. Form and function are just inextricably linked.
As we wrap up our map-making journey today, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. If just one element of your structural blueprint was altered, if a cavity was even slightly smaller, or a joint faced a slightly different plane, how drastically would your daily physiological functions change? It really leaves us to wonder just how perfectly engineered our macroscopic map actually is, and how altering even a single structural boundary could completely rewrite the way we experience life. Thank you so much for exploring the gross anatomy of the human body with me in this explainer. Keep wondering and keep learning.